Good afternoon. I'm David Snyder, President and CEO of the Economic Club of Chicago. And I thank you for joining today's program, a third installment of our Chicago Conversation series featuring the new Illinois Speaker of the House, the Honorable Emanuel Welch. I want to note that we are joined on the call today by local high school and college students interested in public policy and state and local politics. So I welcome all. I'm also pleased to be joined by WTTW's Amanda Vinicky, who covers the Illinois government and politics beat for Chicago Tonight. During their conversation, we encourage you to ask questions or upvote another member's question using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. I'll join at the end of the program and ask the top voted questions for Speaker Welch. Please note that today's conversation is being recorded and will be shared publicly on the club's YouTube channel shortly. We encourage you to share club content with colleagues and business partners and also post on your social channels. Their full bios can be found on our website, but let me briefly introduce our moderator and our speaker. Amanda Vinicky joined Chicago Tonight in 2017 after spending a decade as the State House Bureau Chief for NPR Illinois and the Illinois Public Radio Network. Her work and analysis has been featured on NPR's Morning Edition, All Things Considered, and The Takeaway, and she's garnered top honors from the Illinois Associated Press and the Association of Capitol Reporters and Editors. Thank you, Amanda, for joining us. Our speaker today, the Honorable Emanuel Welch, has served in the Illinois General Assembly since 2013. He became Speaker in January, making history as the first Black lawmaker to hold the position and the first new House leader in over 2 decades, and only the third in the past 38 years. Prior to this role, Speaker Welch served as chair of the House Executive Committee, where he focused on education, job creation, and helping the most vulnerable, as well as streamlining government. Speaker Welch is also a leading voice for adding Black and Brown people to the boards of publicly held companies and has sponsored landmark legislation requiring Illinois corporations to annually disclose their board composition. For 10 years, Speaker Welch served as chair of the Proviso Township Board of Education prior to joining the General Assembly. Speaker Welch, thank you for joining us today. Amanda, I now turn things over to you.
Thanks so much for this opportunity. I very much look forward to getting to hopefully educate your members and myself, of course, on Illinois' new House Speaker. So belated congratulations again to Speaker Welch on rising to that position. Before we get into the thick of things, let's do a little bit of background and introduction. Speaker Welch, you are an attorney, you're a father of 2. Tell us a bit, however, about your background. David there just talked about how you had served as the leader of the Board of Education for Proviso. Was that your start in politics, or why did you decide to go into politics in the first place?
Well, good afternoon, Amanda. Good afternoon, Economic Club of Chicago. It's just an honor and a privilege to be here with all of you. Thank you for that question, Amanda. You know, I've been an attorney for 23 years. I can't believe how fast 23 years have gone by. But I want to say it was 2 or 3 years into the practice of law, I was able to buy my first house. And I wanted to buy a house in the community that I've grown up in my entire life. Which is District 7. I've been here my whole life. And I bought a house in Hillside, and Hillside is where I went to high school, Proviso West. I did not know when I expressed interest in running for my local school board that I was taking my first foray into politics. And boy, did I learn politics real fast by running for the school board. And I can't believe it's been 20 years. November 2001 is when I was elected to the Proviso Township High School District 209 board. I was blessed and honored to spend 3 terms, 12 years on that board, 10 of those years as the board chair. And then when my predecessor, Cook County Clerk Karen Yarborough, left to become Recorder of Deeds at the time, I stepped out and ran for the seat. And you may recall, Amanda, that year I won my race by 36 votes. It was the closest race in the whole state. And here I am 8 years later, the Speaker of the House. Who would have thunk that?
Ooh, one of those every vote counts lessons. I know we both say it all the time, but that is a true story where it becomes reality. Really hits home. Can we also, so I know I have interviewed you, got to do one of my favorite fun stories because I had the opportunity to speak with some really bright young youth for it. And that is a bill that you introduced requiring cursive be taught in schools. But why don't you, can you tell me, since you have served in the General Assembly since 2013, what is the most important piece of legislation that you have been sponsor of?
Wow, Amanda, that's such a great question. I don't know if I can single out just one. Do I have to single out just one? Because
I'll give you a couple.
I thank you. Give me a little leeway there. Because there's been some good ones. And, I'm so proud of the Trust Act, which we sponsored in 2017, an immigration bill, which made, Illinois the most welcoming state in the entire country, definitely in the Midwest. And it was really weird because a lot of people didn't understand way back when why a Black guy was sponsoring immigration legislation. And I had to remind people, first of all, there's Black immigrants out there too, folks, but it's the right thing to do. And then you fast forward years later, and I honestly believe the Trust Act was one of the beginnings of building the Black and Brown coalition that helped elect me Speaker of the House in January of this year.
Right, because you had the support of the Latino caucus that was very instrumental in your election.
That's right. The Black and Latino caucuses were the first two blocks that came out very vocally in support of my candidacy for Speaker. And it started by building that coalition and getting involved with immigration legislation. And certainly I think the work around the corporate board diversity piece, again, which was very big with the Black and Brown caucuses, was very important, and really proud of that. And we can look around the state already and see how that law is already impacting corporate boards for publicly held corporations headquartered right here in the state. Our very own Valerie Jarrett just got appointed to the Walgreens board, and other folks are joining these corporate boards. And I really think it's going to make a difference in the policies that these companies implement, and it will impact our communities in a big way. So there's two right there for you, man.
All right. Thank you. I know it's a little bit like choosing your favorite child. I will not ask you to do that. So
Oh, please. I'll be in so much trouble.
Like to be a tough interviewer, but not that tough. Yeah, we won't go there. Let's be sure to get to sort of the news of the day. And that is, of course, Madigan's successor, and by that I don't mean, of course, successor as Speaker, but for his 22nd House district, just appointed to that position with former Speaker Madigan's backing on Sunday. And then today you received the resignation of newly appointed State Representative Edward Guerrero Codet. Did you have any sort of interactions with him, and can you share any sort of insight? All we know is that it's questionable conduct from the past. Is there any light that you can shed on that situation, or perhaps what it says in general about this process of filling vacancies? The new General Assembly is just underway, and the 22nd district is set to have its third state representative, two of which not chosen by voters.
Yeah, Amanda, my interaction has been very minimal. I do know that on Sunday afternoon, just like I did with the new senators after they were elevated to their positions, I reached out to the new representative at the time and congratulated him and welcomed him to the House, and said that staff would be in touch with him to give him information about joining our caucus. And he was a part of our caucus yesterday afternoon and introduced himself very briefly. And those have been my limited interactions with him. And then last night, I received a call from my chief of staff telling me that she had heard word that he intended to resign. And she didn't know anything more than that and just wanted me to be aware. And this morning, we received word from the clerk of the House that he had indeed resigned. And honestly, that's all I know.
What about this process of filling vacancies? does it need to be changed such that it is no longer party leadership? I'm not quite sure what that would look like. Again, it's not until 2022 that we have really robust elections, though, of course, just yesterday there were municipal ones, but in very small pockets of the state. So does that need to change? Again, 3 representatives in the span of less than 2 months.
Amanda, you know my style. I'm always open to communication and trying to figure out if there's better ways of doing things. But let me say this in terms of a teaching moment, because we do have high school students watching us here today. You know, when you talk about the party structure, that could be a little bit misleading, because the people that were involved on the north side with the replacement of Senator Heather Stearns, the people involved with the replacement of Speaker Madigan, those were elected committeemen. They were elected by the people of those respective areas, and the committeemen have the authority to fill vacancies. That's one of their responsibilities. That's part of their elected responsibilities. If there's a vacancy, they have a right to do that. Now, I do believe that, you know, different committee people do different things, and we could probably encourage and hope that they would do things in a more open and transparent manner. I know on the north side, in talking with the folks up there, they said they had more people involved in that process than ever before, because in pre-COVID, they would have meetings that were live and in person, and you'd be lucky if you get 50 people at a meeting. Because of COVID and doing it on Zoom, they had 2,000, 3,000 people a night participating in candidates forums. And I know here on the south side, in the Speaker Madigan replacement, I know it was live streamed, and people all over the city and state were watching it via live stream. You know, and so are there other ways you can bring more transparency to that process? You should always look and see if there's ways of doing that, and seeing if there's better ways of doing things. But I do want to let folks know that those are elected people from those communities filling those vacancies.
I don't want to stay too long on this, but also Comptroller Susana Mendoza says that this situation again shows why the legislature should pass a measure that says legislators should be paid by the day versus being able to take upfront a month's salary right at the beginning, which Representative Kodat would be entitled to, not saying that he has submitted for that payroll paperwork or that he's going to take a paycheck for a month's salary with just that short a tenure. But is that something that you support?
Well, I certainly would like to take a look at the legislation. I mean, who gets paid? Is it Speaker Madigan or Representative Kodat, or both? I don't know the answer to that. And so again, is there a better way to do things? Is there legislation out there pending that we can take a look at? We're at the very beginning of our process, and now would be a time to certainly take a look at that. And anything that we can do to make things more efficient and streamline the system and save taxpayers money, I've always been a big supporter of that.
Now, you, of course, are in a powerful position, but Madigan's resignation, not just as state representative, but also he's tendered his resignation as chair of the Democratic Party of Illinois. Seeing a contest for that position, who do you back?
Well, let me say this, 36 years as speaker, 23 years as chairman of the Democratic Party, and clearly it's a new era in Illinois politics. It's a new day and time for a new approach. And I think that I'm going to back the Democrat. I'm going to support the Democrat. Whoever wins that race, I think will be someone with the ability to lead our party. I know the front runners, all of them, all of the names that I've heard. Alderman Michelle Harris is a friend of mine. Congresswoman Robin Kelly is a friend of mine. Senator Christina Castro is a friend of mine. They're all great, capable leaders, and I think our party will be in good hands no matter who wins.
Just to be clear here, are you backing anybody perhaps behind the scenes and not just wanting to say it in an open forum like this, or is this really stay out of it because it's a contest and this is sort of an intra-party power squabble that you're not going to get involved in?
Well, Amanda, what I like to do is in inter-party squabbles like this is, I know the person who wins that seat is going to be a Democrat, and I want that person who is leading the party to work with me to help get Democrats elected to the Illinois House. And I'm confident that any of those people that I've mentioned will help us get Democrats elected to the Illinois House. And so I think the best thing for me to do is to sit back and let that thing resolve itself. The elected state central committee people have a process. They're going to go through that process, and I'm very confident that they're going to get it right.
And of course, to kind of tie things together some, it is your predecessor for your House seat, Clerk Yarbrough, that is currently on an interim basis holding that position as chair of the DPI. You talk about electing Democrats, and in Illinois, there are already a lot of elected Democrats, with, of course, Democrats holding every statewide position, as well as having super majorities in the Senate, as well as in the Illinois House, for which you are speaker. So lots of ability to do things there. Let's move to the budget just after hearing Governor Jb Pritzker's proposal for FY22. Taking a step back, he had hoped that this budget would include about $3 billion from a graduated income tax that by think about a 10-point margin, Illinois voters rejected. Do you believe that Illinois should try again, say in 2022, once again, position for moving to a graduated income tax structure?
Well, let me say this, Amanda. I have always believed that one of the solutions to the issues that ail us is a structural change to how we do things. And the structural change that we need, in my opinion, and I've supported it, I was very vocal about it, was changing the way we tax people. We should go from a flat tax to a progressive tax. And I do believe that that's the change that we need here in Illinois. We're one of 7 states that tax folks on a flat rate. And so it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that that's the structural change that we need. And sometimes you fail the first time out, get back up and try again. That's how I've always done things. And so I do think that we probably should revisit that at some point, because that's an important structural change that we need. I'm also a firm believer in that the rich should pay their fair share. And we do it on the federal level, and 43 other states do it that way. And we should look at that and do that here in Illinois. And I've always been a supporter of that.
In the interim, given what it takes to change the state constitution, there has been the notion of sort of going the back door to serve that purpose in raising the tax, the flat income tax, and then giving larger tax credits to those on the lower income. So is that something that you will push for the legislature to do?
Well, let me say this about the governor's budget address, Amanda. I think the governor's budget address, which kicks off our budget making process, was really a good start. I mean, I think the governor, gave a speech in a tough year, and he had some good proposals out there. I think we should take a good hard look at those corporate loopholes that are out there. And, I think that, there's many corporations benefiting from some corporate welfare. And I honestly believe they got to put some skin in this game. The progressive tax failed in November because a lot of them fought against it and put in money against it. And so how do we figure out a way to stop balancing this budget on the backs of the most vulnerable? And again, I've said this before I was speaker, and I believe this even more so now as speaker, with an ability to impact this discussion. I do believe looking at these corporate loopholes, which is corporate welfare, is a place that we should at least start and have this conversation.
Is there anything on that list that the governor has included in terms of quote unquote corporate loopholes, as he terms them, as you term them? Again, the critics of that would say these are tax incentives that are trying to get businesses to the state at a time where unemployment, not right now, but during the pandemic, of course, unemployment peaked. First, let's get your response to that notion. Is getting rid of those making Illinois a place that businesses aren't going to want to come to do business?
Well, I believe that Illinois the city of Chicago and many of the great places around this state are destination points. You know, we are a world-class state with world-class cities, and people continue to come here as evidenced by the record tourism that we were breaking year after year after year prior to COVID. Do I think that we should take a good hard look at the list that the governor has put out there? Absolutely. Many of those things I agree with. There may be some things that I disagree with, but that's why I say it was a good starting point. The governor's budget address is just a starting point of our budget making season. Now the legislature is going to get involved, both Democrats and Republicans. We're going to have real, open, transparent discussions during this process, and hopefully we can have a meeting of the mind. I think it's extremely important, Amanda, with the challenges that we have ahead of us, that we lower the partisan rhetoric, stop the politics, come into a room as Democrats and Republicans and say, how can we get these things done? We really need to address these things honestly. And we know that putting nothing but cuts on the table is not the way to do it. That's why the Republicans didn't respond to Governor Pritzker's call to give them solutions on how they would balance the budget, because they know cuts aren't the way to do it, and they don't want their names behind a whole list of cuts. So let's come into a room, lower the rhetoric, work together, roll up our sleeves, and let's get this work done.
As you noted now, and I know initially in your reaction to the governor's budget address, it is just the start, and presumably we will have a lot of committees that I will be following over something like Zoom versus going to the state capitol for all of that testimony from agency heads. Pardon?
Starting very soon.
Starting very soon. Ooh. Is there anything that you want added? When you say a starting point, as speaker, you really have a lot of ability there, beyond appreciating what the governor wants to do with corporate loopholes. And I know noting also that you believe equity should be at the center of all decisions. Is there anything in specific that you want added as a potential part of the FY22 budget, be it an area that needs cutting or perhaps an opportunity for revenue? Anything that you can share with us?
Well, Amanda, you're asking very good questions. And you know that, I'm very methodical and pragmatic. I don't want to get ahead of the process. And so, the governor has put his proposal out there. The legislature is going to get involved. I don't mind sharing with you that, keeping the education funding flat is a concern of mine. I think we need to continue to build on the progress that we've made in education and find ways to increase the evidence-based funding dollars so that dollars can continue to flow into schools that desperately need it. They have teachers who have gotten raises, janitors and secretaries, and everyone in the school that's gotten raises. The buildings continue to age and cost money to upkeep. We can't expect them to pay the things that they need to pay with flat funding. And so that is one thing that I would single out for you. But other areas, I don't want to get ahead of the process. I want the process to play out, because I don't want folks to think that I'm trying to, impact this thing one way or the other. I just want a fair budget that is fair to the most vulnerable in our state.
And I did want to just make sure, do you have any response to even the notion of, again, as proposed by the CTBA, of raising the flat income tax and then giving higher tax credits? Is that something in principle that you support, or is that something that even is politically palatable? And that I did just say those words, tax increase.
You said it, I didn't. But I do think that we should keep everything on the table. We should not rule out anything right now. We're only in February still. We have a long way to go in this process, and I don't think we should rule anything out. I think that both parties should come in the room and honestly keep an open mind to all of these issues. We shouldn't be ruling out anything right now.
Something that didn't get much attention in the governor's budget address was pensions. He is going to make this statutorily, at least according to the proposal put forth by the Pritzker administration, paying the statutory necessary increase toward the pension systems. Anything that you can talk about in terms of your position on Illinois' pension and that whopper of unfunded pension liability? Stick with the current plan to pay that down, or are there ways that Illinois can get about that, be it quote unquote reform to the current pension systems, what have you?
You know, one thought out there, Amanda, and let me say this, you know, in states that have run referendums to go from flat to progressive, or to allow them to raise their income tax, like in Arizona, they tied the referendum to where the money would be spent. And so if we were to take another shot at the progressive tax, I do think that we should tie it to something, as opposed to just asking the voters to allow us to go to the progressive tax. We should say, allow us to do this, and the dollars that we generate from it will help us pay off our pension obligations. I think that's something that we probably should really consider doing, because that's a proven model that works. Tell the voters exactly how you're going to spend this new money, and they may trust us more, because trust is one of the issues that we have with the voters, and anything that we can do to help build that trust in our voters will help us be successful.
Let's use that trust as a jumping off point for ethics legislation, which has, there has unfortunately been a whole lot of corruption swirling around the Capitol these past couple of years, and yet no material movement on ethics. What do you believe needs to pass? I know you have said that something will pass this year. You want an ethics law to happen, as does the governor. But what will be in that? What to you does ethics reform look like?
Well, I certainly do believe that we need to do ethics reform this year. I think ethics reform is needed because we can't serve the public if they don't trust us, you know, and evidenced by the failure of the progressive tax. Folks don't trust us. If we can rebuild that trust, it'll be amazing what voters will help us do. And so we need to roll up our sleeves and get to work and do something. And I think the pandemic slowed us down last year. The work of the Commission on Ethics Reform, you know, was a good start. The governor's put out some proposals that are a good start. We need to take a look at many of those things and go from there. I mean, many of us already know that the Statement of Economic Interest is a worthless piece of document. You know, it confuses us. So imagine what it does to the layperson. You know, do we need to take a look at, you know, legislator lobbyists and revolving doors and things of that nature? We need to rebuild trust in this body for us to be able to get the important work done. And so, you know, that was one of the reasons why I created an ethics and elections committee with Chairman Burke and asked him to get to work, vet these proposals that's out there, and bring us something that we can get done before we leave town this session.
I'll volunteer that as a journalist, I for one would very much appreciate more fulsome statements of economic interest and more disclosure there. I'll volunteer that. Speaking of relationships, you just talked about relationships with voters. What is your relationship like with Governor Jb Pritzker?
You know, the governor's a friend, you know, and you know, I supported him for election, you know, but now as speaker, you know, and being the chief administrative officer of the House, I have to, you know, also, you know, remember that, you know, the legislature is a check on the executive branch, and, you know, that we have to make sure that we understand our roles. And, you know, but as a friend, for what I do is, you know, the communication is important. And I know that he is someone that I can pick up the phone and call, and we can talk through ideas, and that there's a mutual respect for each other. And even when we disagree, that we don't have to be disagreeable. And because we've certainly disagreed on things in the past, and we're going to disagree on things in the future. And so I'm looking forward to working with my friend in this new role. And I think we're going to do some great things for the state.
One of the items that is going to be on your agenda is redistricting, the drawing of a new map that determines the legislative districts in which you and other members of the legislature will run. What is your definition? There's a lot of talk about ridding of gerrymandering to lead to a fair map. How do you define fair map?
Good question. And I think if you ask that question to 50 different people, you may get 50 different answers. But I certainly think a fair map is important. And what is a fair map? I mean, I think a fair map is a map that reflects the diversity of our state. The diversity is the strength of Illinois. Look at the Democratic caucus, for instance. Diversity is the strength of our caucus. If you look at a map and it doesn't reflect the diversity of this state, I don't know how anyone can call that a fair map. And so I certainly think you have to take that into consideration when drawing this process. Now, what that process will look like, I think it's way too early to tell. We got a lot of moving parts right now. Me being a new speaker, I got a lot of lawyers looking at this and advising me on what the various moving parts mean, including the late data reporting from the U.S. Census Bureau. And so we're going to collect all that information soon and start making some decisions.
That was going to be my follow-up, so I will just make sure. Is there anything that you can enlighten us with at this time, given that the delays at the national level and sending census data to Illinois, and yet there's a constitutional deadline to have a map passed by, I believe, the end of June. So do you foresee, there's, as you noted, a lot of possibilities, something like a map passing in a more general sense and then going back to meet that constitutional deadline and then going back to tweak it, handing this off to a commission so that it would no longer be in the legislature's control? Anything that you're leaning toward?
You know, I'm not leaning anyway right now. I'm basically a consumer of information. If it has anything to do with redistricting, I'm reading it. And in fact, I'm calling people and talking to them and getting their ideas, meeting with people and getting their ideas. Just before this conversation started today, I was honored to talk with the first African-American speaker of the General Assembly in California, former mayor of San Francisco, Willie Brown. He was giving me his thoughts and opinions on California. And he had even mentioned some things that they're currently working on because of the same issue. I've reached out to the National Conference of State Legislatures and other speakers across the country. And I mentioned previously, I'm talking to several different lawyers about this. Right now, it's all about getting the information so that you can make good decisions.
In that learning, something that is, as I've covered redistricting, gerrymandering, something that comes up is that the drawing of districts to help to elect a Democrat or a Republican in a particular area, there's the notion that this has led to increased polarization. Can you remark on that? Is that something that you have witnessed in your time, even in the General Assembly, particularly where we're seeing trends, Democrats winning more in the suburbs that used to be more Republican, but conversely in Southern Illinois, which used to be a Democratic bastion, Republicans winning those districts? Is it the districts, or to what do you attribute those trends?
Well, I certainly don't attribute it to maps. I mean, people have complained about the map making process for decades. What I contribute the polarization in American politics today to is social media and the partisan media outlets. You know, if everyone got their news from WTTW at night, Amanda, we'd be doing all right. But unfortunately, that's not where everyone gets their news. I mean, a lot of them get their news, you know, from Parler and all these apps that drive the polarization, and they start, you know, really creating, environments that just aren't good for our politics. And what we really have to do is get back to a politic that is more compassionate and civil, where Democrats and Republicans work together. We don't hate each other. I mean, that's not good for anyone. And, you know, I looked out on the day that I got elected by my colleagues as the Speaker of the House, and I saw several Republicans that are friends of mine, people that, you know, I really consider friends of mine. I know that we agree on many things, and the things that we disagree on are a very small percentage of things. And that's really what makes us Democrats and Republicans. And it's how we deal with those disagreements is important. We don't have to be harsh and harmful toward one another. We can be compassionate and energetic and defend our positions, make our points, but we still need to be civil and compassionate in this business.
Thank you very much for the plug. We are working on more people watching WTTW for their news. So I appreciate that one. As we're talking about redistricting, of course, part of that is based on the population of Illinois, where we have been losing that, folks leaving the state more so than entering. Again, I will ask your thoughts on why you believe that is the case and what can be done or should be done in your position as speaker to reverse those trends.
Well, Illinois has been losing population for decades. We've lost a congressional seat every decade for like the last 5 decades. And so what we need to do, again, I think part of it is, the rhetoric that we use toward our state. And I think both parties are guilty of that. I think we need to do a better job of working together in the message that we're sending out there. Just like, as parents, you say, be careful what you say around your kids. We need to be careful what we're saying about our state. Stop destroying our state with our rhetoric. And that's so important. When I was chair of higher education a few years ago, I traveled all over this state. I met some of the greatest people in Illinois, in Southern Illinois. And we had some great conversations on how do we bring back Illinois? How do we lift us up? And we do it through our university system. We do it through supporting small business and big business and making sure people know that this is a state where they can come and be innovative and great. This rhetoric of this negative rhetoric just tears us down and it sets us back every time we do it.
Well, Speaker Welch, I think that is about it for me. I'm getting this signal to wrap before you go to questions from the audience. I will leave you with, of course, this is the Economic Club of Chicago. You are no longer a speaker from the city. And in fact, I don't believe we really have, let's see. Yeah. Harmon, not from Chicago, Durkin, not from Chicago. Yeah, Chicago really has lost its place with legislative leaders. Is there anything that you can share in terms of how the state and the city should or need to be working together? Mayor Lori Lightfoot's agenda before the Illinois House. That'll be my last question. So thank you very much.
Well, I think it's really important. I think it's the fact that I'm the first Black lawmaker to be Speaker of the House is a great historical moment for us. But I think it's important to know where I'm from geographically, because I do not have a single precinct in Chicago in my district. It's all suburban, West Suburban, Cook County. And so I think metaphorically, it's like the bridge between Chicago and downstate. We really have to make people understand that this is one Illinois. For Illinois to be successful, we need Chicago to be successful. That is an economic engine of this state. For Illinois to be successful, we need Southern Illinois to be successful. We need Central Illinois to be successful. And so it's all about us working together to move this great state forward.
Thank you again, Speaker Welch. Looking forward to doing this again with you one of these days. I will hand it off now to David. Thanks again.
Amanda, thank you so much. And Speaker Welch, my Q&A tab here is just lighting up. And I have to say that the bulk of the questions do revolve around the state's tax and fiscal situation. So I'd like to dig deeper into that. I know that you mentioned that perhaps there's some path to starting to pay down the state's massive $140 billion structural pension, unfunded pension. I've heard nothing about, what is kind of the grand scheme. I think Illinois businesses are hesitant to expand here. New businesses are hesitant to locate here because of a huge fiscal overhang facing the state. As Speaker, how do you address the issue that we need to address this massive state liability head on?
The massive state liability, meaning the pension liability?
And pension liability, and then, the structural pension liability. And then obviously there are other issues driving the state deficit, but let's focus on pensions for a moment.
Well, I think I mentioned one way, and I think that would be a big way of addressing it is certainly by revisiting the referendum that failed this past November to change our flat tax to a progressive tax. But we have to tell the voters what we're going to do with that money. I certainly think tying that new revenue to pensions would be a winner. People want to know what you're going to do with the money. And, the Supreme Court has already spoken that, pensions are a promise, and we have to live up to the promises that we make. Many people that work in state government give up lucrative jobs in the private sector to come work in state government. And many of the reasons they do it is because of the promise of a pension. And so how do we pay for it? And I think the structural change is the way to do it.
And do you think a flat tax, do you think the flat tax is enough to really address the magnitude of the problem? And if we were sitting here 6 years from now, after another 2 terms or 3 terms in office, what would you predict the state's pension situation is? Will it be markedly better than it is today?
Listen, I know this audience is full of titans, great people who run some fantastic companies, and many of those companies and the folks that run them actually fought the progressive tax in November. But let me tell you something. If we don't change that flat tax structure, we're going to be talking about this again in 5 years. We're going to be talking about it again in 10 years, 15 years. We know what the problem is, and Illinois needs to create new revenue. And 43 other states have a progressive tax. I do believe that, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that that is one of the structural changes that we need.
The other question I'm hearing is, or reading here is, you talk a lot about the increased revenues that will come from a flat tax and the need to raise taxes and close quote unquote corporate loopholes. But do you see any areas that the state could actually cut spending in order to address both this year's deficit and beyond?
Well, I know the governor has already put a proposal out there that shows cuts in the executive branch. But I just don't believe that we can continue to restore Illinois and bring back Illinois and lift us up to the power that we need to be with draconian cuts. Cuts is not the way to do this. I think we have to invest in Illinois. You don't invest in Illinois by cutting. That's not the definition of investing. We need to invest in our infrastructure. We need to invest in our roads, our bridges, our schools. When people visit our universities, they want to see some of the modern universities with IT, that's top-notch IT. That's investment. You don't do that by draconian cuts. And we have decimated our higher institution the past couple of decades. And so I am not one of those people that you're going to hear saying that we need more cuts. We need more investment, folks. There's a road to it, and we need to come together collaboratively and in partnership and figure out a way to take the road to investment in Illinois.
And swinging back to the issue of population loss, which is another question that's shown up repeatedly, is, you mentioned all the reasons why there shouldn't be population loss, based on, the narrative, the quality of our institutions, but in reality, it is happening. So, what specifically would you do in order to kind of stem the loss? We all acknowledge that it's an issue, but what steps as Speaker and as the legislature as a whole can take to stem that migration out of the state?
Well, I think the first thing you can do, David, and that's a great, fair question. The first thing you can do is lead by example. My favorite high school teacher said to me, freshman year of high school, people may doubt what you say, but they believe what you do. And so don't listen to anything that I'm saying, just watch me work. And so we have to lead by example. And I keep talking about changing the rhetoric and lowering the rhetoric. And don't get me wrong, I've been guilty. I've probably gone on Twitter and said some things that I wish I could take back, but we all got to change our rhetoric. We got to be better to one another. We got to be more compassionate with one another. We got to be more civil. And I think by doing that, and if we're all doing that, you're going to start seeing people see us collectively differently. And change isn't going to come overnight. Change is going to be a process. And this process is going to take us some time. But, I do believe in how we communicate with each other is going to help us bring about the change that we need.
I'm swinging back to another question back on pensions. And I know that you alluded to that the Illinois Supreme Court has ruled that you cannot change pension benefits for existing employees. Would you back a system where new people coming, don't change the rules on people that are already in the pension pipeline, but, modify the benefits to new state employees coming on board so that, at least it stems some of the increased liability we're facing?
I don't necessarily think that would work because, the number of folks that are in our system and they're relatively young and going to be collecting pensions for a number of years is what's creating the liability. And we owe them their pensions. When I was first in the legislature, I voted for a bill that was supported by then Senator Biss, now Mayor-elect of Evanston Biss, Senate Bill 1, that drastically changed our pension system. And that was taken all the way to the Supreme Court. And a lot of people that live in my district were very disappointed with that vote because I recognize that we need to change the way we do things. But the Supreme Court said, you can't do that. It's wrong. And so that's why you hear me harping on we need more dollars to pour into the system.
Yeah. Let me swing back to one last pension-related issue. Is the Illinois legislature just passed a bill that would increase pension benefits for Chicago firefighters by increasing the COLA on some of its newer employees. The mayor, among others, said that this is an unfunded obligation that will cost the city more than $800 million over the next several years. You know as well as I and our members that the city is already facing a fiscal crisis. Are you supportive of that measure? What would your response to Mayor Lightfoot be? And do you think the governor should veto the bill?
Well, I believe I voted for the bill, David, if I'm not mistaken. So certainly I support the bill because I voted for it. I think what we have to do is figure out a way to help our city, the economic engine of this state. And so I'm not necessarily one of those people that say you have to hurt one group to help another group. How do we figure out a way to help everybody? And that's what sitting down at a table and having discussion gets you to solutions. And so I think we need to figure that out is how do we help the city of Chicago in this situation without hurting the firefighters and the folks that go to work every day in dangerous jobs. They're running into the fires while we're running away from them. They're running into the buildings that are collapsing under the weight of snow and ice while we're running out of them. And so, how do we support those heroes while also helping the city? We got to find a way to do that.
Yeah. And then swinging back to Amanda's question about redistricting, it's been proposed that the process be taken out of the hands of the legislature and put it to an independent commission in order to, theoretically take the politics out of the process. What are your thoughts on an independent commission to manage the remap?
Well, again, I think that's way ahead of the process. We're not anywhere near that yet. And right now, the law allows the legislature to draw the map. And so as the Speaker of the House, I'm getting the advice and counsel of a whole lot of experts on how can the legislature do its job properly, openly, transparently, and put a process in place that people will be happy with. I mean, everyone's not going to be happy, but people will at least know that it was fair. And so that's what we're focused on right now is collecting the information to do our jobs. And I do understand that there's a mechanism in place for the independent commission. If it gets to that point, it gets to that point.
To the point of education, as you know, under Mayor Daley's administration, the school board is appointed by the mayor. There's been recent discussion about reversing that and having the Chicago school board become an elected position. Are you in favor of reverting to an elected school board?
Well, once again, I think, being in a position like mine, there is a record. And my record, I've supported the elected school board in the past. I'm a product of an elected school board. I was elected, three terms on my local school board. And, the voters are very involved in our local school board elections. They hold school board members accountable. And so I do believe in the system of voting and allowing the people to speak. And that's why I've supported that bill in the past.
Very good. Next question revolves around a couple questions from our audience. And I know you get this all the time, but I think it's an opportunity for you to kind of give your perspective. Is right or wrong? There is a perception among some that you are the successor to Mike Madigan, that you maybe Mike Madigan 2.0 as opposed to Emanuel Chris Welch. So tell us about when you face those comments and those observations. What is your response?
Well, let me say this. My name is Emanuel Christopher Welch. My friends call me Chris. You guys can call me Chris. And my freshman year teacher told me, people may doubt what you say, but they believe what you do. I'm 6 weeks into this new job. Let my actions speak for themselves. Let me continue to work with my Democratic colleagues, my Republican colleagues, and try to put my stamp on this job that my predecessor held for the last 36 years. It's a new day, it's a new era, and give us some time with this new approach. I think it's an honor and a privilege to be in this position, and I want to take advantage of this opportunity to do something good. But it takes us doing it together, and by folk, not giving me a fair shot by letting my work speak for itself is not doing it together. We have to do this together. Lower the rhetoric, stop the politics. Let's work together and let my actions speak for themselves.
Great. So I know this is a topic that you've raised, when you were installed as speaker, but member Sean Casey asks, does the just structure of the Illinois legislature, which gives a lot of power to the speaker, him or herself, need to be reformed? And what do you see as your efforts towards that direction?
We've already instituted some historic monumental changes in our rules that show that, things are different. We have a 10-year term limit on the speaker and minority leader that for the first time ever. That's 5 terms, 2 years, a decade. And no matter what folks on the other side are saying, that's a historic change. I also believe that we've empowered our chairs to make decisions on bills. Members of both sides of the aisle need to work those committees for their bills, which, oh, by the way, every single bill that was filed on time is being kicked out of rules and into a substantive committee. That's a fair chance. Democrats and Republicans equally need to work those committees and work their bills. Like I learned 8 years ago as a freshman legislator, work your bills. Those are monumental changes. Now, those who criticize that many other rules are the same people that supported the rules when Lee Daniels, a Republican, had those rules. The rules are about managing the process, and we still need to be able to manage the process. We're trying to get things done. We're trying to, make things happen. And, some folks like to use the rules to slow things down and kill good legislation.
So I think the idea of term limits is a very popular one. Do you think it has a realistic expectation of garnering a majority among incumbent members of the Senate and House?
Well, it's in our rules, so it's currently in our rules. Certainly rules can change. So there's legislation that members have filed that will likely fare well in the House. What it does in the Senate, I don't know. I mean, many members in the House favor term limits on leadership. Let's be clear, it's about leadership, not on individual elected representatives. And I think that would be healthy. We have a deep bench in our caucus, and I think we have a whole lot of people that can be Speaker of the House. And term limits on leadership will promote, new, fresh ideas from time to time, and I'm a big supporter of that.
Great. So we're just about to wrap up. One last question, as you noted at the top, you're speaking to a business audience. We've talked a lot about the state's pension liabilities, the tax environment. What is your message to the business community in terms of how you personally are going to make Illinois a more attractive place to do business and live?
Well, you know, I love working with our business community. I think it's important that we continue to have an open line of communication with each other. We have to continue to sit down and discuss ideas openly, and not being accessible is not a way to help that grow. I think it's important that we continue to recognize the strengths of this great state and work together to sell those strengths of this state. And you know, and Illinois is a great place for innovation and research, and you know, it's a great destination. And I want to help our business community succeed, and you know, get out of COVID, get on the other side of COVID, bounce back from this devastating virus that's hurt so many of our great businesses, and do all that I can do and be a partner with you to help our businesses thrive.
Speaker Welch, thank you so much. I know you're new in the role. There are many demands on your time, and I cannot thank you enough for joining us this afternoon.
David,
And
it was my pleasure.